Hi, everyone. Delighted to be talking on this episode with storyteller, master of story, I will say, across media, Dave Barclay. Dave, thank you for joining.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Looking forward to having a good old natter, as we say in England.
Absolutely, absolutely. I know that folks out there, listeners, will know you for your career in film. I'm spying Labyrinth over your shoulder, which
Oh,
looks
yeah.
like it's a signed copy of some kind, a signed poster of
It's a
some sort.
signed poster I got from Jim Henson for having worked on the movie. He did that, I think, with pretty much everyone who worked on the film. Everyone got a signed poster from Jim. So,
Very nice, very nice.
mhm.
You have also worked on The Storyteller. You've worked in the world of Star Wars. You worked on Where the Wild Things Are in 2009. So a wide range of creating and performing.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, it's my passion. I just love doing it, and I've been so lucky and privileged to have it almost a 50-year career. It's about 46 years at the moment, so approaching 47. So it's like, yeah, and I've loved every second of it, to be honest. So
Yeah, yeah. You also have authoring that's out in the world for people to read and to enjoy the backstory.
there we go. There it is. There's the image of me on the front cover when I was 7.
Oh, love it, love it. Love the personal artifacts and how those come through in storytelling too.
Yes, well, I mean, about probably 20 years ago, a good friend of mine said I should put down my stories. I should talk about the history of doing the movies and the projects that I've done because nothing like that will ever quite exist again because everything's changed so much. So
Mhm.
and I was thinking, well, how am I going to do this? I mean, how am I going to write it? Because there's so many stories over close to 50 years, and well, including my childhood, 60 years. So, and I thought, I'm going to do what most people don't do. They usually put a very thin selection of photographs in the middle because it's cheap to print. I decided
Mhm.
to go with full color every single page throughout the entire book with hundreds of never before seen photographs from all the different productions I've been on. So it's a really a sort of visual way of describing my past and my history and the things that I've done. So I think people can probably appreciate it more being able to see the photographs. So that was my hook. As
Mhm.
soon as I realized I was going to use the photos, I'd find a photograph and then write a piece of text about it. So
Love it. Love it. Um, Before we get into a little bit of what that must have been like to pour over those photographs, I'm curious about the initial link to authoring as a young person, as that child on the cover, um, playing and engaging in storytelling. What connected you at first with telling stories in film and other things like that?
well, that's the life I grew up with me because my parents were puppeteers. They were
Mhm.
originally actors who went to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London, RADA, and they started off acting, but then they decided they wanted to do something where they could work together. And they created Peck's Puppet Theatre, which was their traveling puppet company that they ran for the rest of their lives. And they wrote their own stories. So they were storytellers, actors, puppet makers, they theatre designers, set designers. The two of them did everything. So
Wow.
that's exactly the sort of thing that I got into when I was a kid. So I started writing stories when I was at school. I wrote a very poor attempt at a novel when I was about 13. I look back at it going, my goodness. But then I also started trying to make home movies. Now, this was before video and certainly before cell phones. So it was standard 8 cine film, and you'd put it into the camera and you would take the shots that you think you might be able to put together to make a film, send it off. You actually put it in the mail and it would come back 2 weeks later. And then you would project it on a flickery backdrop and see the images that you've created. So I did that in my teenage years as well. So um, I initially wanted to, yeah, be more of a film director or be involved in film somehow. But when I saw Star Wars, I thought, no, I've got to work on something like this. And by a lucky series of connections and breaks and flukes, I got to work on Empire Strikes Back in 1979 at the grand old age of 19. Well, I think one of the things I grew up being the third puppeteer in my parents' shows. So they were the two main puppeteers, but they couldn't just leave me behind. This was long before typical childcare, so I came along with them before I went to school. So I was part of their warm-up act. So that photograph of me on the front cover is what I would do when I was not at school. I would warm up the crowds before my parents did their traditional glove puppet type show. So with my marionettes, I sort of gravitated to string puppets as a child, which again isn't typically something that most kids go for. And so, yeah, I think I was an old soul when I was a kid, and very felt very professional, felt very dedicated to puppetry. Because I remember I was rehearsing one of my puppets when a friend came around and said, "Oh, I see you're playing with puppets again." I said, "No, I'm not playing. I'm working." And for me, as
Mhm.
a like an 8-year-old kid, there was a big difference between playing and working. So yeah, I
Yeah.
was very focused as a kid.
There is that work of storytelling. Was the written word continuing part of that for you? Were you always writing after the novel at 13 as well?
To a degree, but yeah, as soon as I got caught up in making movies, well, being a service provider, I mean, building puppets and puppeteering for all these amazing movies, a lot of that was put on the side. I revisited filmmaking in the late 90s and wrote and directed a short film, which I loved the process of. And then a few years later, I decided to convert one of my parents' original puppet plays into what could be a 90-minute movie. So I developed, I got a couple of friends to help me. One brilliant guy, Scott Benton, wrote some early drafts for me, but he basically advised me, well, it's your story, it's your parents' story. You really ought to do this yourself. So I
Mm,
did. So I spent about 5 years writing this movie. So when about 10 years later, when I decided to write my autobiography, I'd spent a lot of time writing and trying to edit down, trying to make the dialogue for the characters in the movie understandable and natural. So I tried to use the same sort of approach in my autobiography.
Apart from your work, we wouldn't have cultural staples in quite the same way like Jabba the Hutt, Yoda. Those are a couple of the major characters you mentioned working on Empire Strikes Back. So I just wanted to give a nod in those directions as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, Yoda was really the first animatronic puppet that could really act. I mean, there had been special effects and different makeups and monsters for the previous, like, well, probably almost 50 years. But as far as like a hand puppet animatronic with all the face controls and the focus of making this ultra realistic and believable, Yoda was the first. And it was what I was hoping I could find a career in. But as I was
Mhm.
at school, that job actually didn't exist yet. So I actually got my foot on the first rung of the ladder, working on Empire, doing the job that I was hoping I could do later on. So I just
Hmm.
broke into it. I
Hmm.
was very, very lucky. And Yoda was like, it still is groundbreaking. I mean, I think anybody who looks at Yoda, even to this day, um, Irvin Kershner, Mark Hamill, and Frank Oz, the three creative people that made those scenes work, um, it was just a masterclass to watch filmmaking, performance, and dedication to getting things right. So we would work on Yoda and get these tiny little details. But the great thing was is that we were given the freedom to almost self-direct because there were so many tiny details. We would go to what they called back in the day rushes because it was all shot on film. So at the end of
Hmm.
the day, they'd be rushed off to be processed so that the next morning they could see if the work that they did the previous day was usable, whether there was any problem with the film, whether light had got in or hairs in the gate, as they would call it, hairs in the actual camera, which would make it unusable. So they would check the rushes in the morning. It was always silent. They never had the time to synchronize the sounds because they were recorded separately, unlike today's digital
Yeah.
images and stuff. So we would watch the rushes and we would just see it silently on a huge screen. It would be like going to one of the really big cinemas and looking at the screen, and then we could judge what we were doing. And so
Mm,
not only was it a great education working with all these other people, but it had the mechanism of being able to look at what we were doing and then adjust. Oh no, that was a bit too extreme on that shot, which they didn't use. Um,
mm,
that shot, oh, that's great. So I'll keep it more in that range. So it was just, yeah, we could learn from what we were doing by being able to see it, because often in films the actors aren't really encouraged to watch their own rushes, the work that they've
mm,
done. But puppetry is different. So, and Frank insisted we all did that. So it was a just amazing learning experience. And then from that, Frank asked me to join him and Jim Henson on the Dark Crystal, initially as a sculptor, puppet maker, puppet designer, and then as a puppeteer. And then I got a lovely call from Stuart Freeborn saying, David, you did a great job taking over from Frank Oz as chief puppeteer on Empire. Would you like to be chief puppeteer for Jabba?
mm,
So I didn't have to audition. I didn't have to go begging. I didn't have to pass all. I guess I'd already passed the tests on Empire, so I was just offered the job. So I said yes, please. So, so I got to be chief puppeteer for Jabba, and of course all the experience working with Frank on Yoda, and then with Dark Crystal, where there were dozens of new characters to try and bring to life. And we all came to understanding a shorthand of how best to approach that through the Dark Crystal. So
mm,
myself and my good friend Toby Philpott, who also is a second generation puppeteer. So the two of us, because we're about the same size, they needed two puppeteers about the same size. And I'd worked with Toby before, and he's a wonderful person, wonderful performer. So I was able to choose Toby as my co-pilot inside Jabba. So yeah,
mm.
we sat shoulder to shoulder. So he was pushed up against my left shoulder with his right shoulder. He was the left hand, I was the right hand, and we worked Jabba together.
That's amazing. That is amazing. And of course, you were talking Dark Crystal, so creating that kind of story world and those original characters, and I mean, an entire set of sort of this different universe with Skeksis and all the other characters that were part of that.
It was amazing, and all of that visual brilliance came from one guy, Brian Froud,
Mm,
genius artist, conceptual designer, and just a truly wonderful human being. And he worked literally non-stop every single day for the entire production,
mm.
constantly creating art. He wouldn't be one of these people, oh, I don't really feel it today. He had to just create massive, massive amount of material for every single thing that was in there. He had to design it, and so he was non-stop doing that, and just a wonderful person and a brilliant creative artist. So yeah, so these days I think everyone really appreciates Dark Crystal and Labyrinth, which he also was conceptual designer for, and
Mhm,
just the genius of his work. So but yeah, no, he's a dear friend, and he was the visual instigator of everything. And then we had great puppet makers, great sculptors, great designers bring those visions into reality and turn them into practical puppets. But no one had ever done it before. There was no YouTube. There was not even
mhm,
any textbooks, because this was literally brand new. No one had ever done it. So we had about 18 months of research and development when I first joined. I joined November 1979, and I just turned 20. And so we had about 18 months to do research and development. Then we had to build the puppets for the actual movie. And then we filmed over a course of 6 months. And so it was an amazing period of time. And Jim set up this environment, Jim Henson set up this environment to allow the artist to thrive. And it was just amazing time and space. I've worked on, yeah, like 35 movies, and there was nothing like working for Jim Henson.
nice. So, of course, the storyteller art was also one of those projects and taps into my love of story as well. I know that you performed parts for that and were part of that story universe.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Well, we just finished. I just finished being supervising chief puppeteer on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and we
Mm-hmm.
just finished doing that, and I got a call from the creature shop that Jim would like me to build a particular version of one of the devils for the Soldier and Death story that Jim was
Uh-huh.
directing. It's the only one that Jim directed. So Jim asked me, he needed like a marionette because I'd worked with marionettes for him on Labyrinth. So, and he sort of liked my approach. So he said, could I come in and do that? So I came in and built the that, and then I was one of the hand puppets that was right next to Bob Peck, who was the main actor there. So I was right by his face. So Jim placed me there, and had we just had a wonderful time. It was a lovely time, but sadly, it was the last time Jim directed me because not long after that, he sadly passed away. So that was the last time I got directed by Jim Henson.
Now, of course, with such big names, influential storytellers, I'm sure that you've been shaped in many ways. I'm curious about any other storytellers that have been part of your inspirational path, the written word and authors and people that have inspired your creating.
Well, I mean, from authors, and one of my early passions before Star Wars was even considered, I think, or conceived, would have been the original Planet of the Apes. I
Mhm.
I read the original book by P.A. Bull, which was a French translation. I love the book, and I also love the movie, which was adapted quite, in some ways, quite radically. The whole ending in the movie is not in the book, but I love both of those, and I was really into science fiction. My parents were too. So there was a period in the 1970s, early 70s. I would have been 13 or something like that, 14, maybe even slightly younger, when our TV blew up, literally blew up. And it's like at the time, my parents said, "Oh, we can't really afford to have a new one. We just won't bother watching TV." And it was an amazingly creative period for all of us, for my mum and dad, and for me. I read a lot and I created a lot of different things. I made my own Planet of the Apes makeups in the end, and
I love it.
made the costumes and did my home movies with all of that. So yeah, so the Harry Harrison was a British um, um, author, and I loved his work too. So a lot of that science fiction was really underpinned it. So yeah, so the ideals and the principles and storytelling of the Planet of the Apes was something that really connected with me at the time. So it's that was really something that I've still to this day love.
Yeah, yeah. Science fiction has such boundlessness in storytelling. You can really play with so many elements of reality, and then ironically, those elements are usually pretty close to the truth at the same time.
Well, yes, there can be analogies of things that are going on. So, but yeah, no, it's but yeah, when I saw Star Wars, I mean, I was just hooked by that fantastical world and the unique way of storytelling, but also the new level of special effects. I mean, just all the fighters, and I mean, even like Chewbacca that Stuart Freeman had created was great. But of course, he created the apes from Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, and the opening
Oh,
sequence. He had created those, and they were phenomenally ahead of their time. So Stuart was somebody that I was a big hero of mine, and he was the guy that employed me in my first movie. So
very nice, very nice. I love how the story connects, and I notice that Planet of the Apes does make its way into your book as well.
yes, yeah. Well, it does. I show some of the my progress as a teenager, wanting to try and make these masks, trying to make these characters and bring them to life, and just trying to improve, trying to improve. And Yeah, and there was a point of time when my dad said, because I was about to take all my UK exams, which were clearly very important for education, and I was spending a lot of time on my Planet of the Apes films. My dad said, "Oh, stop doing those. You'll never get anywhere making those bloody ape films," he said, you know. But in typical form, he and my mother let me have the decision. They would give me good advice, and I remember yelling at them at some point. Well, not yelling, just being raising my voice, saying, "You're always right." You said you give me some advice, and then 2 months later, yeah, you're right again. And they said, "Well, we have been on the planet a little bit longer than you, and we were just trying to encourage you and uh, take you forward." But when I got to work on Star Wars, my dad said, "I'm really glad you didn't listen to a word I said."
Yeah, yeah.
Because the work that I did on Planet of the Apes and all the makeups and everything that I focused on actually ended up being more important than my school exams in hindsight. But that would be a one in a million shot. So I think as a parent, he was saying the right thing at the right time. It's just that I was incredibly lucky.
Okay. Now, I'm always curious about the writing process, the research process. I imagine that putting together My Life with Animatronics, as you were looking at these photographs and as you were kind of pouring back over your life, I imagine that was rewarding, and I imagine that was quite the process at the same time.
Yes, I mean, I wanted it to sound like it was my voice speaking like we're speaking now. So my first draft was actually I used voice to text, and
Uh-huh.
did a lot of editing afterwards because often it was like too rambling. It wouldn't sit on the page and it wouldn't read well. But the initial sense of it, I wanted to sound like it was my voice. I didn't want it to have any feeling that it was ghost written because a couple of my friends have had some books and when you read them, oh, clearly this is ghost written. So I didn't want that. I wanted it to be very specifically my voice. So yeah, and I'd learned through writing my movie with 46 drafts, I think, which were quite serious drafts, not just a few changes here, that um, getting the basic stuff down is relatively easy. Editing it and getting it to sound exactly the way you want is a lot harder. So,
Mm.
um, but having the images to work from was my revelation. It was the breakthrough because initially I'd been trying to work out what am I going to do? How can I approach this? And so then I went through and I thought, well, then this is going to cost what 5 times to print what it would normally cost an autobiography. And I thought, well, okay, I'm just going to go with it. So, because I could have done it all black and white, but I thought, no, I can't do it black and white. So I did it color, and again, certain page thickness. If you're just printing black and white, you can have a thinner page, and the book's thinner. But then the photos all bleed through and look horrible. So no, I'm not going to do that. So I did all that research. I actually used some previous texts and a small little pamphlet thing that I'd made on my Planet of the Apes films, in fact, um, to test out the whole Barnes and Noble print method, just to see that the book was going to look and feel and represent what I wanted. So as soon as I knew that, then I could edit and adjust the text size. I didn't want it too small. And a lot of people said, "Oh, I'm really glad that it's not so the text isn't too small because they're more my age, and it's good to have bigger text for people whose eyesight's beginning to sort of like fade a bit." So all of those things were important to me, and they were all part of the decision of what this final book would be. But yes, once I had come up with the photos, I also thought, well, I can't tell every single story because there's just so many of them. I just have to choose the ones, and having the photographs enabled me to choose stories that reflected the photographs. So that, in a way, helped me to edit out. I mean, there are some stories with other photographs that aren't in there, but the ones that are in there and the photographs I've got really made it sort of very clear to me where I was going to go. So yeah, so the photos really dictated the text, and I tried to keep it as succinct as possible.
I hope those additional photos will eventually come with a story in some other volume or some other way at some point. I hope the creating continues.
Well, maybe, yeah. I mean, I'm thinking about just doing a small book, probably a third of the size of My Life with Animatronics, just about my parents, because I mean they're now both they died a few years ago now, about yeah 3 or 4 years ago. My mum and my dad 5 years before that, so they're not around to tell their story and the stuff that they did, and it will. once I'm gone, no one can tell that story. So probably more for my family, my granddaughters, and if they have children in the future, just to have an idea who my parents, Mike and Anne Barclay, were, who created Pex Puppets, who set me up on this path of following my passion and my joy. So I'd like to be able to get that down, even if it's 10 copies that I just print. And so I'd like to do that. Would there be any interest in a second edition of my book? I'm not sure. I mean, it's really nice to get it out there, and I've had some really lovely comments back from people saying that they're enjoying it, and it's they've really had a great time reading it. So yeah, I feel it's definitely been the right thing to have done.
Absolutely. I appreciate the personal story, and the way that has impacted your life. I appreciate the history of film as well. I can remember looking at books of sort of like the Boris Karloff era and older films when I was a young
Yeah.
person, and just wonderful to connect with that through photographs and stories about the behind the scenes action.
That was one of the things for me. Yeah, I mean, I loved the original King Kong, 1933. I loved all
Hmm.
the early movies and the early movie techniques and all the tricks, and um, and then so I could appreciate that as a teenager in the 70s. But I still liked the current day movies. I remember going to see the remake of King Kong, which was 1976, with Rick Baker in his gorilla suit, and I liked that. I mean, obviously I could tell it was a man in a suit, everything, and where it cut in and out. So because I had got quite a decent understanding of what went into all of these things. So yeah, but I still appreciated all that. But for me, I mean, just the art and design of the original Planet of the Apes makeups, I just really love them because they're not claiming to be 100% pure apes, because this is a fictional planet that they're on, and everything has evolved, and they are talking, and it's like I love the John Chambers makeup, and I did have the joy of actually meeting him before he died. It wasn't long before he died, actually, but a good friend of mine, Duke Cullen, got me he was going along to visit John, and he asked me would I like to come along and visit too, and I did, and I was able to thank John for the inspiration that set me on this path. So yeah, yeah, amazing artist.
Love the chain of inspiration, and I know that you have a busy conference schedule, so I know that people can connect with you at different conventions and places like that. Any particular place online that people can go and follow along and see the book and things of that nature?
Yes, well, the book is, if you can't see them at a convention, because that's probably the easiest way, because I can just hand a copy of the book over. The best way is going to coolwatersproductions.com. COOLWATERSPRODS, I think, productions.com. And on their shopping site, on their, yeah, the book is available, so you can get it from there. Um, my website's playing up a bit. I'm not quite sure. I've got to check them out because if you click on my website, davebarclay.com, DAVEBARCLAY.com, it comes up 404. If you click on it again, it loads. So I'm not sure, there's some problem, I think, with Network Solutions who are hosting it. So I haven't had a chance to chase it down. So if you do
Mhm.
try and get onto my website, um, double click on it. Well, click on the link again because the initial 404, I don't know what that's about. So anyway, so I've got to try and sort that out. So if in the meantime I haven't had a chance to fix it, you can still get to see my website if you do that. So which is really frustrating when I'm trying to promote the book. But yeah, I'll do that. And it will be available at barnesandnoble.com next year. We decided that
Wonderful.
this is Cool Waters, Derek Mackey, um, who's the president, and I decided we were just going to have it available for generally for people who could actually get it and I could sign it because obviously you get it printed from Barnes and Noble, there won't be no autograph because I won't be part of that process. It won't get sent to me and then sent out to them. So, but yes, it will be available for people who want to get it a little more easily. But right now, we're having it as like a premium special for the conventions and through coolwatersproductions.com.
Wonderful, wonderful. Many thanks for the time and the conversation, and I will, of course, link that in the description, and there will also be a link that pops up. Did we miss anything in the talk through that you want to make sure to share before we close out?
I don't think so. I think this has been an excellent interview. Thank you. Wonderful
Wonderful.
questions. Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
so
because
glad. I'm so glad.
a, a lot of people ask the same ones, and you haven't. You've been very unique and very very specific. And thank you. It's been lovely. So, but I think yeah, I think
Absolutely.
that's the thing. Is like there's the book, and if and there's me on the front, or that's me on the back. And yeah, just stuffed full of images. You saw one of the Planet of the Apes things. That's us. That's me as the team on Empire Strikes Back with Yoda, and me with the genius animatronic supervisor Lyle Conway, who did Return to Oz, Little Shop of Horrors. So yeah, there's lots of behind the scenes photos for people to enjoy, and stories to go with them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And clearly you have a storied career full of stories. We didn't even get to talk about Audrey and that part of your experience either, but that's there as well.
Yep, it's there as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, many thanks, Dave. Glad to have you back anytime and wishing you great reflection, great success, and wonderful time with the family as well.
Thank you very much.